Very exciting work. It's my great pleasure to introduce the session on innovative practices and treatment courts. Um, I'm joined today by the Honorable Judge Jared Rice. Judge Rice is a presiding judge in the New Rochelle City Court. He was a public defender for 14 years, was a member of the New Rochelle City Council, where he spearheaded the first My Brother's Keeper initiative in Westchester County in New York. And this focuses on the cradle to career development of youth, particularly boys and young men of color. In October 2020, Judge Rice initiated the Opportunity Youth part, an emerging adult justice initiative that works with defendants 16 to 24, and they use extensive community partnerships to provide workforce development, educational services, behavioral health, mentoring, housing assistance, and other key supports. And I'm very excited to have Judge Rice here with us today. Judge, I'll let you try to pull up your PowerPoint while I introduce our second panelist, Dr. Demetra Suravasadi. Dr. Sorvasadi is an associate professor in the School of Law at the University of Nicosia, a PhD in criminology, has extensive criminal trial experience. She's been conducting research since 2017 on drug treatment courts, promoting the Canadian model in Cyprus and Greece. I don't see the doctor on my screen yet, so hopefully, Mary, you can reach out to her and get her set up, and we're going to move forward with Judge Rice. Judge, can you bring up your PowerPoint?
Yes, and thank you, Dennis, for that kind introduction. I appreciate you, everything that you do on behalf of the court system in New York, and I'm just pleased and honored to be here to discuss with all of you something that is near and dear to my heart. It's an element of criminal justice reform. It's an element of community justice. It is something that we are looking to reshape how we look things, the way we look things. And in doing so, I think it's just important to recognize the fact that although I serve in the New Rochelle City Court, we are a function of the New York State Unified Court System. We are able to look at what other states are doing. And more importantly, in the context of this conference today, we're able to look more globally, right? I think that sometimes we just take for granted that things are done the way they've always been done, and we don't necessarily look outside of our four corners, our four walls, to see what else are they doing. What are they doing in Europe, or what are they doing in Canada, or what have they been doing in for the last 300 years in other parts of the world? And I think that it's an opportunity to kind of reflect and just see where things are. So with that, I want to make sure that I do have my screen up. Everyone, you can see my screen, Dennis?
So you can see your screen. You just want to hit the little desk thing at the bottom so we can get into presentation mode, and you're ready to roll.
All right, how's that?
You're doing good. Looks great.
So far, so good. And I have about 30 minutes or so, or 29 minutes or so to
Yes,
kind
they're
of.
doing some technical troubleshooting with the doctor.
Okay.
So you've got 30 and maybe more, but hopefully the doctor will join us.
All
They're
right.
working through some technical bugs. Please
I'll talk.
begin.
I'll talk slow to get started. So, the Opportunity Youth part. It was established in 2020, October 29th, 2020, and we have a logo. We are now a designated problem-solving court effective 2022. So that's important because now we're recognized by the unified court system, and we are able to be a part of the unified court system, and we're able to also set the stage for other courts to look at what we're doing and perhaps replicate or look at ways to focus on emerging adult justice. So Dennis kind of gave a little bit of information about me. I'll just kind of expound on that. I became a judge in January 2020. Prior to that, as Dennis stated, I was a public defender. I was a public defender in the City Court of Mount Vernon. That's another court here in New York State. And I did that for several years. Part of my duties as a public defender related to different criminal justice reform initiative, and that was called Raise the Age. At the time when I was working back in 2012, New York State was one of two states, that would be New York and North Carolina, that automatically criminalized the behavior of 16 to 17-year-olds. And there was a movement and there was a lot of advocacy around raising the age of criminal responsibility to 18. So in the interim, from 2012 to 2019, I was the lead attorney in the Adolescent Diversion Park, and we called it ADP. ADP essentially worked with 16 and 17-year-olds who were in the criminal justice system. And today, in 2022, it's hard to believe that a short while ago, we had young people age 16, age 17, they could be arrested for something as minor as shoplifting. And we would incarcerate them with older people. We would put them in the holding cell with older people. We would treat them as if they were adults. And we all know that at age 16, you are not an adult. And we all know that just by use of common sense. And you know that from the brain science as well. And fortunately, New York State enacted Raise the Age. So from 2012 to 2019, I was the attorney in the adolescent diversion part. We worked with the school districts, particularly the Mount Vernon School District. And at the age of 16, 17, you are still technically a minor. You still are under the auspices of your school or your family. So we worked with the families, we worked with the schools, we worked with social service providers. It wasn't as much with the job or vocational aspect because they were still young and still feeling and finding their ways. But it was a good precursor to what I'm doing today with the Opportunity Youth part. Also, as a New Rochelle City Council representative, I did that from 2011 to 2019. I was deeply ingrained in the community at the grassroots level. And one of the initiatives that we started was My Brother's Keeper New Rochelle. Then President Barack Obama, at the time in 2014, he initiated a challenge for communities. New Rochelle became the first community to accept that challenge. And in doing so, we looked at different milestones and we looked at different levels of performance outcomes. And in looking at the data, it became clear and apparent that locally in New Rochelle, as well as nationally, which was the presenting data, that we had a problem with our boys and young men of color. They were not faring as well as their counterparts. And we looked at different markers. We looked at milestone 1, which was getting ready for school, being ready and prepared for school. We looked at milestone 2, which was reading at grade level by 3rd grade. That's a huge indicator because no longer at that point, at 3rd grade and after, are you learning to read, but you're reading to learn. And if you're behind at that point, the studies show that life just becomes more difficult. Academics and schools becomes more difficult. And that leads one to, we have milestone 3, graduating from high school on time. If you're not able to graduate high school in today's world, in today's economy, you're at a disadvantage and it makes things that much more difficult. So we want to make sure that you're entering school ready to learn, you're reading at grade level by 3rd grade, and that you are graduating high school on time afterwards. We want to make sure that you are able to access one of 2 things, either post-secondary education or the ability to receive vocational training. We know that after high school, college is not for everyone, and we don't want to promote that for everyone, but we still want you to be able to have marketable skills and be able to grow and gain from your experiences and be able to be someone who can offer something to somebody in some field of employment. Thereafter, we want to make sure that you obtain employment, whether that's from graduating from college, whether that is graduating from high school. And the last milestone, which is the one which ties into the work that we do with Opportunity Youth part, is one of second chances and being safe. We want individuals to be able to walk freely in their communities without looking over their shoulder. We want them to feel safe and feel loved. And again, we want to offer them second chances in life. So what is OYP? The Opportunity Youth part, affectionately referred to as OYP, was launched in October 2020. So I became a judge in January of 2020. And if we can all go back to January 2020, those were the pre-COVID days. Those were the normal days. In January 2020, things were going well. I was in my first month of the job. I was learning. February, likewise, learning more. And then March comes, and early March, we just get hit by the pandemic. So if there's one thing to know about New Rochelle, it was that at the time of the initial pandemic, we were kind of at the epicenter of community spread. It was believed at the time that if you kind of just stayed away from New Rochelle and you didn't interact with people or talk to people or go around people in New Rochelle, that somehow we could stop the spread of COVID. But we all learned that that is not the case. That did not turn out to be true, and it became a global pandemic instantly. So what happens? The court system shuts down. We're down for a few months, and I was not able to do much but until about July or so. So from March until July, we're in shutdown mode, as much of the world is as well. And I was able to take some of the lessons that I learned from those first 2 months when we did have a sense of normalcy. And in those first 2 months, I would see young people come before me with criminal charges. And I would ask them, are you working? Are you in school? And inevitably, the answers to those were invariably no. And what we call youth who are disconnected from the services, resources in their community, we call them disconnected youth. But there's another more positive name that we refer to them as, and that's opportunity youth. So we spin it, we take a negative, we turn it to a positive, because although they are disconnected, if we can connect them, that presents an opportunity. And the term opportunity youth is one that was coined a few years ago, and we just used that and we labeled it with our opportunity youth part. So we come back to court in July or so, and we're now virtual, and we have cases still coming in, and we are at this point able to have conferencing. We are kind of running on a virtual hybrid system at this time during the summer, and I reached out to some of my colleagues and networks that we've developed through My Brother's Keeper, and we were able to identify different programs that were available to young people in our community. There was one program in particular called the Debut Day program, the Workforce Development Academy for Youth. So what I wanted to do was bring those resources to the court. I reached out to the representative from that program, and I asked him, would you be able to help these young people? He said, absolutely. And I said, would you be able to kind of come to court and to allow us to monitor their progress? He said, absolutely. So what I did initially was had service providers come into my chambers early in the morning, and we would start about 9 or so. We had the DA, we had the defense attorney, we had a service provider, and started off with one case, then it went to 2 cases, then it got to about 4 or 5. And at that point, I would have court officers knocking on my door politely saying, Judge, we have a full courtroom out there, and I know that you're doing this, but we kind of have to get court started. So it was then determined that we should take our show on the road, and instead of doing early morning conferences off the calendar, we can actually create our own day, our own designated part. Now, effective October 2020, we have a Thursday afternoon calendar for the Opportunity Youth part. And at 1:30, we have a conference with all the cases, and at 2:30 we have the actual calendar. And with that, we now have moved things forward. And I know that PowerPoint says about 140 individuals have engaged, but this is old. I need to update it, and we're closer to 200 today, and that's in about 2 years. So the mission statement of the Opportunity Youth part is to connect emerging adults who are involved with the criminal justice system with the vital and necessary resources to inspire them to strive for excellence, all the while offering them second chances in life. Again, this notion of second chances is one that's important to us. It's one that's essential to the work that we do. And when we say that we want them to strive for excellence, it's something that we try to bring out of them, because we know that many of these young people, most of these young people, have something special within inside them. And it's just up to us to kind of allow them to bring it out of themselves. So for me, the greatest moment that I've had and I've found in OYP, and it doesn't happen often, but it does happen, it's when you are involved with the young person and you kind of see them over time grow and trust the process more, and they are starting to feel good and better about themselves and their prospects for the future. And it's that one moment when you look into their eyes and you see that the light just turns on. And it's a life-changing moment. And to get to witness that is fascinating. And you see that they now want to do things for themselves. And they now want to be able to reach their potential in life. And they're on a mission to do so because we were able to provide them with some necessary interventions at the time when they were down and out. When you come to court in the criminal justice system, you're kind of at your low point, and we see you at your low point, and we get your charges, and we don't define these young people by their charges. We define them by the good things that they have to offer in life. So the science of late adolescence, we know that this is all revolving around brain science. We know that there are developmental differences that exist in young people, 16-24, that have a direct impact on their ability to make informed, intelligent decisions as it pertains to legal matters. So because raise the age, increase the age of responsibility to 18, we still know that the brain does not fully develop until about 25. So what about those in the 18 to 24 bracket? Do we treat them as adults? Do we not differentiate what's going on? And the thing about emerging adults in particular in this day and age is that life is just difficult. It's more difficult than it was in previous generations and previous decades. People are staying in school longer. They're waiting longer to get married, waiting longer to have children, waiting longer to buy homes. And in that process, there isn't much support for that younger age. And if you're out in the world alone, life is incredibly hard. And if you are living in an unstable living environment and you don't have the family supports, just getting through life can be almost impossible at times for many people. So what we do is recognize this, and we provide that safety net for those individuals in this age bracket who still have not figured it out yet. We know that young people in the ages of 16-24 are poised for positive learning through rehabilitation and intervention services. We see this all the time. We see that light click on. We see that when we do have court supervised, court monitored programming, we see that when they are able to benefit from that. Initially, many of the young people are resistant in the beginning, but they come to realize that this is not only beneficial for them personally, but they're also their legal case, and they get with the program and they start to actually take things more seriously. And we know that children are different from adults by the ways of their culpability and with respect to this notion of transient immaturity. Transient immaturity basically says that as you get older, you get more mature. At 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 years old, I have a 10-year-old son, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I don't expect them to make the same decisions as adults. And I know that as they get older, they become more mature. And there's a spectrum of maturities called transient immaturity, and the science shows that it goes pretty much up to the age of 25. So what we want to do is have our court system reflect this notion, the spectrum, and we want to treat these young people with age-appropriate resources, age-appropriate remediations. So OIP, the key features. We have participants who are assigned a judge. That would be me. I'm the presiding judge. I'm the founding judge of the Opportunity Youth part. And you still retain your other rights, right? You have your attorney. So now the attorney is standing with you. But what we did is introduce new concepts, new people to the process. So it's, in addition to your attorney, we have your case manager who's also there standing with you. I'll talk more about case management in a short while. We have independent clinical assessments. We have court design wellness plans. We have regular check-ins. Those are court dates. We have weekly compliance reporting. We have community-based services. And the program breakdown is into 2 phases pretty much. We have phase 1 and we have phase 2. So phase 1 is when you are initially arrested, you are arraigned, and we are figuring out what to do with you from a wellness plan. We're trying to figure out your strengths and your weaknesses and areas of improvement. And also, aside from the programmatic standpoint, we are also having the district attorney's office and your defense attorney, along with the court, figure out what would be an appropriate disposition of your case. We take all types of cases in OIP. The unique thing about today in OIP is that in addition to raise the age, there was another criminal justice reform movement in New York State, and that was regarding bail reform. So in the past, judges were able to set bail on a multitude of cases, and many times people were sent to jail because they couldn't pay minimal bail amounts to get out. So what bail reform did was said for minor charges and for non-qualifying offenses, there cannot be monetary bail set. Instead, we now have non-monetary conditions, which we employ a lot with our Opportunity Youth part. And because many people are no longer in jail, they're out in the community, we want to make sure that we have eyes on them. We want to make sure that we're working with them. We want to make sure that we are providing those necessary interventions. And because of bail reform, we are now seeing that individuals with more serious cases are not in jail during the pretrial process. So we don't discriminate in OIP. We work with anybody pretty much who is out in the community. We look for services that are out in the community. And if you are in jail, we don't have the resources to work with you, but we do monitor those individuals who are incarcerated for when they get out, because for the most part, nobody's going to be in jail forever. And when they are released, they'll be right back in our community. So we look to have transitional phases for individuals. Phase 2 is when you enter OIP, you get your legal outcome. Sometimes it's a felony reduced to a misdemeanor. Sometimes it's a misdemeanor reduced to a violation. Sometimes it's a dismissal. Sometimes it's an ACD in the German, a contemplation of dismissal, which means that after a 6 or 12-month period, the case will be dismissed. Conditional discharge, a 12-month CD basically says for 12 months, you have to abide by these conditions. And what we do with OIP is we give you that 12-month period to work with OIP providers and to be someone who reports to court still throughout that period. If you're doing well, we don't have to see you as much. If you're not doing as well, we have to see you more frequently. And what we found is that this 1 year, 12-month period of your conditional discharge is a world of a difference. And we see them from 1 year to the next, and they become different people at the expiration of the 12-month period. You graduate. We have a nice ceremony for you. We provide a gift card. We provide a certificate. And you are no longer under the auspices and jurisdiction of the New Rochelle City Court. You are free. You are about to go out and back into the community without any court monitoring. And our goal is that we can loop you back in to be someone who can be part of the solution and help some other young people who are going through similar things. Participation in OIP does not guarantee a more favorable outcome. I do want to say that the district attorney's office is the responsible agency for plea negotiations when it comes to reductions and such. So we work hand in hand with the district attorney's office. We found that over time, they have been much more willing to work with us, and we found that they have bought into the model, which is a unique and radical model in a sense, where we are not looking at these young people as criminals. We're looking at them as young people who are part of our community, and we're looking at them to be able to have second chances. And the district attorney's office has been a really good partner, and some of the dispositions, as I stated before, are conditional guilty pleas, they are conditional discharges, youthful offender adjudications, ACDs, and in some certain circumstances, we can do outright dismissals. Case management, that is one of the huge components of OIP, and that's the initial component. So what we do when you are first arrested is we find out where you live. Half of the participants live in the New Rochelle community. For the most part, most of them are in the Westchester County community, which is the county that we're in New Rochelle. And outside of that, we have many individuals who come from the Bronx and other areas in New York City, some in Long Island, some in Connecticut. So we identify your geographic location to see where we can place you. And the case manager is kind of the person who is responsible for working with your lawyer, working with all the other components of your wellness plan, working with all the other service providers. And case management is derived from social work practices. So the case managers are not necessarily social workers, but they act as quasi-youth development workers, and social work practices come into play. It's a new development in as far as criminal justice, emerging adult justice, and we are kind of at the forefront in New Rochelle. Other communities are doing as well, but we're identifying ways to take existing resources and combine those within the court process. Case management They work with workforce training, job placement, academic support, mentoring, housing, childcare, much more. And it's a full gamut of services, but I do want to mention just one in particular. It's the mentoring component. And with the mentoring component, we have identified that as what we call our special sauce. And mentoring is what it sounds as it is. It is taking an individual from our community on a one-on-one basis. We place them with a young person who is here. So in addition to the case manager who is employed by the social service agency, we have a mentor, someone who has social capital to give time to exchange with these young people. And we found that the mentors have been sometimes the person who the young person has gravitated most towards. We don't care who is the one to get the young person to do what they need to do. Sometimes it's the lawyer, sometimes it's the mentor, sometimes it's case manager, sometimes it's the behavioral health specialist. And but the mentoring component is unique to OYP, and we have about 50 mentors who've been placed so far. We have a mentor coordinator whose job is to manage the recruitment and the mentoring and the training and the placement and the oversight and all of that. So it's a complex thing that we added, but it's something that really takes us over the top and gives us more success. Other functions of case management are to provide for crisis intervention and advocacy and life coaching and the creation of the wellness plan. Behavioral health is another huge component. About half of our participants receive behavioral health. Behavioral health can mean different things. It can mean anger management. It can mean general psychotherapy. It can mean substance abuse training. We have young people who come to us with driving while intoxicated, DWI charges. We have young people who come to us with drug charges. And we found a disturbing trend as of late. The last few months, we've seen an explosion of those who have fentanyl in their system. We all know about opioid use disorders, and fentanyl is the new wave, and we're seeing that many young people are testing positive. There are different theories. One theory is that fentanyl is being just distributed in many different drugs, and that's the pills, that's the marijuana, that's the cocaine, that's the heroin, and unbeknownst to many people who are ingesting these other drugs, fentanyl is inside of it. So when they're testing positive for fentanyl, we know that it's a serious thing that we're working with. So what we do is refer individuals to one of our substance abuse facilities. And with that, we work to get them clean. It's not a lifelong process. We are with them for a short amount of time here in OYP. So the goal is to get them clean for a period of time and to allow them to have less interventions, even to finish and graduate from the substance abuse component. And we want to show them that during this time period, you were able to be clean for 6 weeks, for 9 weeks, for 12 weeks. And we want you to be able to look back at that time period and see how productive you were. We want to see all the goals that you had outlined and the progress that you were able to make, so that moving forward, if you ever relapse or fall back into a pattern substance abuse, you could always have this as a benchmark of success. And we know that substance abuse is a tricky thing to deal with. But our resources are being used as best as we can, and we know that we don't have these young people forever. So our goal is to make the biggest bang for our buck while we do have you. Anger management, again, that's a process that we have where you could go through 12 sessions, and we find that after the anger management process, these young people are able to use these tools and figure out ways to avoid conflict moving forward. We have the Center for Court Innovation, the CCI is what they're called, and they are the nonprofit arm of the court system. They are an invaluable resource. We have a person who works with us in the courthouse, and she is tasked with doing all of the court coordination. Prior to us having CCI and having this position, it was me doing all this on a daily basis. I did that for about 8 months or so. And now that we do have this court coordinator, it makes my life that much easier. I work with her on a day-to-day basis, and her job responsibilities regard introducing the participants to OYP. She's there in court when they're first there, finding opportunities, reporting weekly, which is huge, creating mitigation packets, collecting, analyzing data, and overseeing the communication and events. And weekly reporting, it's a nice thing to have because now the DA's office can have reports on these young people. The defense attorneys can have these reports. The young people have access to their own reports, and it just tracks their progress, right, and their growth, or even lack of progress, or slip-ups, or relapses. And we have about 10 to 14 people on the calendar each week, and we have reports for all of these young people on a weekly basis. The court coordinator is responsible for that. So we have some implementation data from our 2-year anniversary. What we do on our anniversary every year is have an all-star celebration. And the all-star celebration is to highlight the successes and the progress of some of our higher performing young people. This year we had 13 all-stars. And what we did was invited the community, had some dignitaries. We had our congressperson, we had our administrative judge, we had our mayor, and we had these people come to court and congratulate them and recognize them for the efforts and encourage them to keep moving forward and to keep being positive so that they can, when they finish this process, be contributors to our community. And we have about 71 who are actively involved with OIP today. More than 30 stakeholder organizations. And again, we offer many services. Restorative justice is one service that we just start doing more with. Restorative justice basically is conflict resolution and it's mediation. And we were able to take 2 of our participants recently and take those 2 who had court cases against each other and work with them to resolve the physical conflicts they had. They had an agreement that they worked out working with the restorative justice agency that we have. And based on that agreement, a secret agreement that I'm not privy to, the DA nor the defense attorneys, they're able to work out their differences offline out of court. And we find that sometimes that's the better way to go. Restorative justice is a practice that dates back hundreds of years and centuries. And we know that in different societies, it's been done, still being done. And we want to see what else we can do on our side to look at new ways to resolve conflicts and to make our community stronger and healthier. And we've had about 29 graduates to date. We've had about 70 volunteer mentors. 96% of our individuals have been referred to case management, about half to behavioral health services, about half have received employment, vocational training, or education program. And we have, of our 71 participants, about 25 of those in the second phase of OIP. Like I said, the majority of the individuals who are in OIP are from New Rochelle, our local community. And the majority of those also are from Westchester County. 86% male, 14% female, and the age range is kind of broken down equally amongst the 2 years. And also, just want to highlight just on the racial component, it kind of fluctuates, but for the most part, we service Black and Latino males, and that's boys and young men of color, similar to what we did with My Brother's Keeper. And about 58% of the current participants are African American, another 34% Hispanic. And we see that the disparities just in who's coming to court, and we kind of are able to see and peel back some of the layers as to what they've been through, where they are in life, some of the traumas that they've been involved with. So it's a learning experience. We meet weekly with our team and we all are experts in various ways, but when we come collectively and we talk about this topic, something that we're all dedicated to, and we're providing this service as part of our life mission, we are able to then work more closely together and figure out how to make this work. And I'll leave you on this. Dennis, I know my time is up at this time, but I just want to say that moving forward, there is an opportunity that we have to work and receive funding on the preventative side. We had a focus group for our young people who are in OIP, and we asked them for takeaways. And the number one takeaway was that they did not realize that these services were available to them prior to them being arrested. And if they would have known that these services were available, they would have taken advantage of them. So now we want to do more on the preventative side to have these resources more widely available, to do a better job at connecting young people to the existing resources that we have. And even for those who are done with OIP on the aftercare side, when they're done with court, to be able to provide them the sustained opportunities to develop and grow and to be assets to the community that we all know that they can be. So that is my slideshow, Dennis. I don't know how I did on time, but I'm happy to.
Judge, actually, we have some more time because the doctor is having ongoing technical issues. Um, and so if you don't mind, I see some applause coming in, and I'm gonna encourage folks to put questions into the chat. And while those questions are coming in, I'd like to pose some questions. We've got a little bit more time, and I'm really interested in this project in the sense that it's a population that previously didn't participate in our adult drug treatment courts, often because of the charges, whether they were charges of sales activities, sometimes weapons charges, but more often because individuals had low levels of disorder development, that they didn't have, profound mental health or substance use addictions. So this is a population that had previously gone unserved in most of our courts, and now the Opportunity Youth part is serving this population. And you talked about how they're being served. I was just wondering if you could comment on first the legal eligibility, and then we'll get into some of the other services that are providing, because I had some questions about those. But could you comment on, access to
Yeah,
diversion, access to justice issues?
yeah. So access to justice to me is huge, right? I wanted to make sure that what we did was inclusive, right? And I think what at times we do is don't work with the harder cases, right? Because it's just too difficult. And whether it's a harder case because of the charge, whether it's a harder case because of the individual, those are the cases that I actually prefer. I think that we as a team relish in the fact that we can change lives and that we can work with those who have been given up on, right? They're here for a reason. They've been through different situations before, whether it was through family court, whether it was through school suspension, whether it was through family instability and housing instability. And here they are with us. And this is kind of the last shot, especially when you're in the older range of this 23, 24. So for us, legal eligibility is pretty simple, right? It's if you are out on bail, if you are released in your community, if you are in a service area where we can connect you to resources, you're stuck with us. And we work with you and you can opt out, right? If you proclaim your innocence, right? Not everybody's guilty. You're presumed innocent when you come to court and when you're arrested, no matter what the charges are. You can opt for a felony hearing, a trial. You can do all that. You can opt out. But at the same time, while you are here, using non-monetary conditions, if I have to, I can ensure that I make you avail yourself to some new ideas, some new people, some new positive services, some caring adults in your life, because many times these young people do not have it figured out. So there are exceptions to what we do as far as who can come in. There are two exceptions, and we've negotiated this with the district attorney's office. We don't take on sex cases. Those are cases that the district attorney's office feels should be handled separately through special prosecutions. And also for intimate partner domestic violence cases, we don't take those as well. And the reason why we don't take intimate partner domestic violence is that we have a special court, integrated domestic violence court, that sits in White Plains in the county court level. And we take those cases, and those cases are referred there, where there's a different treatment plan and a different prosecution team and a different judge that just handles all these cases. So I did make a recent inquiry as to whether or not we can keep some of those domestic violence cases, because we do see some intersections, right? Just with the DV component, also just being disconnected and having holes and gaps in your life plans. But at this time, we're going to keep those cases in the integrated domestic violence court in White Plains. And again, if you're incarcerated, there's not much we can do with you. Although we do know that young people are being transitioned to be released. And I do my best to work with them at that point and to connect them with the services that we can have for them. If you're going to be released on probation, we have something new with the probation department where we work with them, and I can in some instances make a condition of your probation that you keep coming back to OIP at least for a year. And we know that probation isn't the easiest thing for people to succeed on sometimes, and there are technical violations, and probation officers have a job to do, and they hold you to a higher standard than you used to being held to. So we find that when you're in OIP and on probation, and we have that relationship with the probation department, individual officers, that it makes your time on probation easier, and we look to get you going during that first year.
I'm going to again encourage people to put questions in the chat, but I have tons of questions for Judge Rice. So if you don't have to jump on the bench, I'd like to pose a couple of those to you now, Judge.
I'm all yours.
I'd like to switch track a little bit and just talk a little bit about your perspective of the role of the judge in engaging with community resources. I'm aware that the mentors that you've engaged, many of them have been outright engagement by yourself and engaging with the community. You previously sat on the city council. Can you talk a little bit about the role of the judge and really getting in there and engaging with your community, having stakeholder meetings, getting these people to come to the recognition events? Can you talk a little bit about the role of the court in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. So as I stated before, my background based in community as a New Rochelle City Council person. Also, I had that unique experience in working in the specialty court with the adolescent diversion part. And I do also want to mention something important just about me. My mother was a city court judge as well. She actually was a city court judge for many years, and I replaced her. So I have her as somebody who I could always lean on and talk to and understand how the role of a judge works, how it can work. And I was able to kind of come in with a different lens, a community-based lens. And I see that there are different courts that do different things. There's the Red Hook model, right? And there are other ways to look at ways to involve the community more. And I wanted to come in as a judge and really set the stage that this city court should be a community court. And we should be able to have that interplay between the community and the court, because it only benefits all of us. It's a win-win situation for all of us. So the mentoring component is something that comes from that. And these are just individuals who are known to the community, known to myself, and they want to give back. Many people say, how could I get involved, right? With the George Floyd killing, that led off a firestorm of reforms all across the board. And it looked at ways for institutions to take a deep look inside themselves and see what they could be doing better, right? So I was just in the right time at the right place. We were during this transition period with COVID and virtual programming and courts, and then George Floyd came. And from that, I was able to take advantage of a situation where I knew that change was necessary, and I knew that people were ready for change. Would I have been able to do this 3 years ago? Maybe not, but the time was right. And I've had huge support from up above, from Judge Mendelson, the Office of Justice Initiatives. It's funny, when I first got started and I just had this idea, we were working with the providers and we didn't yet have the Thursday court in October. And I was explaining to her what we're doing. And she said, oh yeah, that's emerging adult justice. And I'm like, yes, emerging adult justice. That's exactly what this is. And why didn't I think of that? But there is a science to this. And I was able to have her backing. I was able to have the backing of my administrative judge at the time, Judge Kathy Davidson. And we were able to push this forward. And I think that people in the community did know me. They did trust me. I did have contact with the New Rochelle City Hall, and we wanted to make that connection as well with the other branch of government, right? We wanted to have the judicial branch and the legislative branch and executive branch kind of work together alongside for what we all know is a problem and this issue in our society that we can do better on. So it's just multiple collaborations, trust in each other, and a desire just to do good and to help people with pure hearts, and to know that some of us are more fortunate than others. And that's the reason why we are where we are in certain places. And if we kind of share some of that social capital, it makes our community a better, stronger place.
Judge, I just popped into the chat a link, not a link, but the title of the publication from Columbia Justice Lab on key elements of specialized courts for emerging adults at eajustice.org. I think that would be helpful for folks to look at when you're looking at some of the critical elements. But I'm not seeing a ton of questions. I would like to continue to ask you a couple because I'm really curious about some of the lessons learned for you.
Yeah, so I'll
You
just
know,
jump in just on the Columbia Justice Lab. One of the agencies that was referred to me by Judge Medicine was the Columbia Justice Lab, and I was able to look at what they have already started, right? And they had case studies for different courts throughout the country, Chicago and California, and one in Brooklyn. And working with Columbia Justice Lab, they were able to provide that background science for me. And also they were able to provide an intern for me to get me started. So in those first months when I did not have a court coordinator, it became tedious and burdensome. I'm doing all the data, I'm doing the reporting, and I'm just doing my best. But I had an intern, fortunately, from Columbia Justice Lab, who was able to work alongside me, and that led us to getting position, a funded position through with CCI. And again, that funded position, right? We don't have funds necessarily to do this, but it was a local foundation, the Westchester Community Foundation, that saw what we were doing and recommended that we can utilize the services of a court coordinator. So we do have a grant for that. How to make this sustainable, that's a discussion that we're having today. This is now year 3. And I think that we have a proven model that can work not only here in other places. And it may just be that the court system may want to look at maybe more investment along these areas, right? So that's a discussion that we're having. And I'm sorry, I cut you up, but I just wanted to comment on the Columbia
no, and
Justice.
also taking the model to scale. Got to identify, what is the model? What are some of the lessons learned? I wanted to ask you maybe about, you know, um, some of the youth experiences and what made them successful. Hear a little bit about the youth, whether it was, a training and certification program that made the difference for them, engagement with a mentor.
Yeah.
Can you just give us a little insight as what's working?
Yeah. So what's working? That's a great question, because a lot is working, right? And every case, every success story is unique in and of itself, right? So for one person, it may just be that mentor who was able to motivate them and push them. For another person, it could just be me, and the fact that you have a judge who cares about you, who appears to be fair and provides a loving environment in the court. And that right there is enough for you to say, you know what, I want to do different, and people believe in me, and I want to believe in myself, and I want you to believe that I do believe in myself. Sometimes it could be the lawyer, right, who goes over and beyond, right? These lawyers that we have 2 attorneys who are specialized and work with OIP now. And these lawyers are more than lawyers. They are advocates, they are friends, they are mentors, they're quasi case managers at times, they're behavioral health specialists at times. And it could be the lawyer who is the person. I have one story where a young man who was addicted to opioids, and he had a scholarship to Binghamton University, and it was our job to get him to college. And we were able to get him to go to inpatient. We were able to get him clean, and it was the attorney who was the one who was the deciding factor, and doing all the background work, working with his family, working with motivating him. And we found that it just became a nice thing to see that everybody is working together. We don't have egos, it's a team spirit. And I think overall, to answer your question, the thing that works is just the collaborative nature of what we do, right? And it's not often that you see different nonprofits working together day to day, right, without competing. And although they may offer similar services, they know that they're putting aside their personal funding streams and aspirations just for this one purpose of working with emerging adults here in the New Rochelle City Court. And we found that it's something that we all believe in, and we all look forward to Thursdays where we meet. It's rare that we have an off Thursday. We're going to be off Thursday, December 29th, right? It's a Christmas holiday weekend, and there's no court, and there was no court on Thanksgiving. But other than that, we're here. The show goes on. And I found that when we don't have court, we have so many cases that there just gets backlogged. So we have to have court. I don't have much vacation time, right? I don't have much nights to take off. But it's the collaborative spirit that we all have and the love that we provide to each other and to these young people.
I know that they've said about treatment courts in the past that it's less about participant accountability and more about systems
Yep.
accountability. That the court can serve in a convening function and bring people together, ensure that there's no gaps. You talked about a young person who is getting ready for university, but you also spoke previously about that's not for everybody. And having had the opportunity to visit you on a couple occasions, it seemed like your training and certification programs were and also a critical element. Can you talk about maybe how that's benefited some of the youth?
Definitely. So in New Rochelle, we have a lot of growth around the building and construction trades and development in general. And so what we do is we look to offer young people OSHA certification tests, the safety hazard training that you get. And with that, you get an OSHA card, and that is a nice first step just to getting you to do something more. We have other programs, Access VR, which deals with those who may have more learning disabilities. We have programs around culinary. We have, if you can think of it, we can name it, and there's something out there for everybody. And I feel that because we have a system that's geared around not only the vocational component, but also importantly, the behavioral health component, right? And we know that we just can't throw you into a job. We know that we can't just throw you into a training. We have to make sure that from a behavioral health standpoint, that you're ready for that. And we're patient with that. So that's oftentimes a prelude just to the vocational component. That's been one of the secrets to our success as far as just the timing and the different agencies that we have working in all the programs that we do have today that exist today. Westchester County is a resource-rich community. And because of that, we want to be able to utilize these resources and direct them in the most appropriate ways. And using court monitoring, court supervision is a surefire way to obtain success. But there are some questions in the chat that I just noticed as well, Dennis.
Actually, I'm looking at the chat. I'm not seeing them.
I see one from Arlene Gonish Nelson. Do you see that?
Please take it. I'm gonna reopen.
Okay. It says, for those young people who may be gang involved, how do you ensure that they may be able to exit this life safely through the OYP program, as exiting gangs can be quite dangerous? That is a great question and comment, right? And we have a young person today, actually. He's on probation. He came to us with a gun charge. And this is kind of the risk of working with those who have the more serious cases. We got a call from his probation officer that he was shot at last week. And the probation officer wants him to come to court earlier. They want an ankle monitor, they want a curfew. And because of this level of communication and collaboration, we're able to work to see the red flags that are occurring and to act imminently. But to answer that specific question, there is this newer model of mentoring called credible messengers. And credible messengers are individuals who have shared life experiences. They may have been gang involved. Many times they are formerly incarcerated. And it's one thing to have a successful CEO or a doctor or a lawyer or a business person work with the young person on the mentor side and the social capital exchange. But it's another thing to have someone who has walked in those shoes. So that's something that we're looking to do more of. And the best answer I could give to that is that the credible messenger component is something that has worked in other places. We're not doing as much with that today, and we're looking to get more resources in. And credible messengering is something that we've highlighted as an immediate goal, immediate need. But there is success in that, and it's a tough situation. There's no magic silver bullet to getting people out of gangs and to changing their lifestyle. But the credible messenger is probably scientifically the best route to go at this point.
And we've been doing a lot of work on our adult treatment courts, getting persons with lived experience, whether it's experience with mental health, substance use disorders, criminal justice experience. There's an additional question here about what steps do you think it would take to bring this to scale? That's a question I often ask myself in the state of New York, but other people are asking about it in Canada. It would seem like, you really got to use that convening power of the court to pull together your community resources, identify the issues. Of course, there's a ton of databases that one can access, but really engaging also with that you know these individuals may not necessarily be seeking recovery, but we call them recovery-oriented systems of care. There's a you know, at this age range, they may be early in the development of mental health disorders, which may just be emerging in your late teens and early 20s, or haven't really, got a very significant substance use disorder. But I would imagine that there is significant trauma that these young men and women have faced. Have you tried to address? We talk about trauma-informed courtrooms. What does that mean for an emerging adult part?
So informed care, trauma-informed decision-making, trauma-informed courtrooms just means that the assumption is that we're not just judging them for who they are today. And we know that there's history and that we all have a past, and those past experiences have shaped us all. And when you have positive childhood experiences, then you're more prone to have more positive adult experiences. And when you have negative childhood experiences or adverse childhood experiences, whether you have parents who were incarcerated or parents who were abusing legal drugs or child abuse or homelessness, and all those things add up. And when you have that and you factor in just lack of academic success in your formative years, we get them here in court, and it's easier to understand why they're here. So we don't just assume that you are alleged to have committed a crime and that's the end of the story. We really dig deeper into that. We lift up the hood, and you're able to have your empathy kind of come out, right? And seeing that and say, man, this is rough, and what can we do to help? And that's the first reaction, the first response. But as far as building this up to scale, I think that one of the things that we did in working with the Office of Justice Initiatives, we had stakeholder meetings, and we had them initially on a monthly basis, and I think bi-monthly. And it was similar to what we did with My Brother's Keeper. With My Brother's Keeper, a requirement was before you went ahead and put together an action plan, you had to have a neighborhood convening. And that's the first step. Obviously, you need a judge who's going to take the time to do this, right? It's a commitment on that part. You need a court that's supportive. You need the clerks to be supportive of what the judge is doing. You need the district attorney's office to be willing to be a partner. You need the defense attorneys to be able to understand the differences between emerging adult justice and regular criminal justice. You need the community partners to have the resources ready to lend, willing to lend. If you don't have those community resources, then there's not much you can do on that. You need to have mentors who are willing to give back. You need to have people who are willing to buy into this model of community justice. I think we're more of a community justice outfit than a criminal justice reform outfit. And I think that we're really honing in on the needs and goals of the community. And you need to have a strong community, strong enough community to get this going. I feel that our community, Rochelle, we're not a major city, we're a small city, about 80,000 people. And because of that, we can have a better handle on the situation. We can literally identify every single young person that comes before our court. We know them on a first last name basis. I feel with some of the larger municipalities, New York City, for example, there's not a sense of community with New York City as a whole, right? You have to kind of break it down to the geographic areas. And the court system doesn't necessarily do that as neatly as it does for the city courts, where you can break it down by New Rochelle or White Plains or Yonkers or Binghamton or Newburgh or Buffalo, right? So I feel that the community aspect is huge, and you just need somebody to kind of take the lead. And also having city government involved as well.
But you talked a little bit about resources in the community, and there's one additional question in here, and it's the fact that this individual is observing an increase in human trafficking with individuals who have a developmental disability or a mental health issue. I know that the court doesn't serve in a clinical capacity, but who do you get them to when you have these questions outstanding in your mind?
Yeah, so one thing, even with human trafficking, right, we know that young men and young women are totally different, right? And you have to have different approaches for the young ladies. We found that for the most part, the young ladies come into OIP better prepared, higher education levels, more robust employment experiences. And we found that they've been graduating at higher rates than the young men and faster than the young men. But with that being said, we found that there have been some situations with the young ladies where they've just been through enormous trauma. So we have the case managers who are able to work with them, and we find that with young ladies who with the issues, it's a woman-dominated industry with the case management and service providers as is. So we're able to connect them with someone who they can confide in, someone they can trust. And a lot of that stuff doesn't get to me, right, as a judge or the court, and appropriately, right, because we don't want to put too much of the business out there. But we do work with them, and I will be high. It would be made known to me that there are some other issues, Judge, that she's working on, and I know that they're requesting some sensitivity towards that. And I know that behind the scenes that they're working with them and getting them those resources that they have. But we don't have like a human trafficking part or anything. We just know that they have issues that they're dealing with in the past and even presently. And we know it's not easy out there for many of the young ladies.
Well, Judge, we're at the top of the hour. I want to thank you for, you could probably talk about this all day long. So for some of your insights and your individual efforts in your community to support these young people, I want to thank everyone for your time. And I want to turn it back over to Mary and Jennifer to let us know